Hello and welcome back to The Hill. I'm your host, Worthington Moore, and joining me on today is Prairie View City Councilman Xante Wallace. Xante, how are you doing on today?
Man, I'm doing great, man. It's an honor, and I appreciate you allowing me to be on this platform.
Yes, most definitely. So, the first question that I wanted to ask, because it's very poignant to your story, is that you started out as a councilman at the age of 21. You were elected as that position basically as you're crossing the graduation stage. So, how was it like, handling that? But then also you're doing a PostGrad. So how was it like being a city councilman and handling your role as a student?
Yeah, it took a lot of time management, but I'll tell you, being a student at Prairie View University, all you really learn to do is manage your time and professionalism. So, I would throughout the day, and at the same time when I first got elected, I was also SGA vice president. So, one portion of the day was doing SGA vice president work. The next hour, I was studying for my mathematics classes, and then next thing you know, I'm also running a campaign in the evening. So it took a lot of time. I definitely had to sacrifice a lot of things that a typical senior would do while graduating. But at the end of the day, I was able to be successful, and I've been able to maintain that as I got into my graduate program for community development and was reelected a second time while I was also getting my secondary degree, and I got reelected and graduated the same semester as well. So, I've been doing this balancing act for a while now, so I'm pretty used to it.
Yeah, so I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you were reelected in 2020, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, since COVID, has basically drastically affected, came in, March 2020, and since then it has basically affected all of our lives. Just tell me a little bit how that has affected your time and tenure since, whenever COVID really hit, how it's affected your role as a city councilman.
Yeah, so of course, COVID was unprecedented in terms of the type of disaster. I mean, we've had hurricanes, we've had fires in the city before, but a full global pandemic is something that we weren't used to. So one, you already have the issues of not being able to get in contact with people face to face. So moving everything to virtual operations obviously has some growing pains with it. But over time, as you set down processes and procedures, it gets a little bit easier. But and I'd also say that it allowed us as a city to really dive back and reflect as the pandemic was starting to slow down, people getting vaccinated. What was our plan? What was our vision? So even though City Hall was shut down in the sense that people couldn't go inside of it, City Hall was still working, in which we're still coming up with plans to try to move the city forward in a post-pandemic era. So we've already made some strides with some technological advances so that we can engage our community a little bit more through phones, social media, through newsletters, through any type of online presence. But it also gave us an opportunity to not take for granted, the things that we do on a day-to-day basis. So I truly do feel as a community begins to come out of the COVID age that there's going to be a new heightened sense of community engagement. And I think that we're going to stop seeing everybody as strangers and start seeing them as neighbors, because at one point we couldn't see anybody. So I think we're going to be just really appreciative of the opportunity, and we're going to take advantage of it.
Definitely. So I want to touch a little bit on the initiatives that you've been able to achieve as a city councilman. We've got the Abundance of Hands Ministry. We've got the Block Adopt a Block initiative. We've also, you had Protect Our Village. So I just wanted to ask you, how did those, all of those things, how did they come to be?
Yeah, so one of my biggest priorities, and I also ran on this in my first initial campaign, is bridging the gap. The city of Prairie View is a true HBCU college town, where the HBCU is the economic center and the anchor for the city, and that the city surrounds the HBCU. And so I feel like as an HBCU college town, we want to have that college town feeling. We see it in San Marcos, we see it in College Station, but Prairie View should have that same feel, whether you're on campus or off campus. So those initiatives was to bridge the gap, bring students outside of the campus, outside of the comfortability zone, into the community to meet those community members, but then the community members get out there outside of their comfort zone and come to the campus to meet the students. And I've been doing these things for about 3 years now. These are totally new systems, and I've been having great volunteer efforts. I've had co-founders, I've had, university staff, I've had city council, I had the mayor support. I've been getting support from the community all around. And so I think it's been really successful. I truly do look forward to what the city will look like in 3-4 years. And if we continue these efforts of bridging the gap and turning seeing everybody as our neighbor.
Definitely. So, a part of 2020, aside from COVID and the George Floyd protests, another thing that happened in 2020 was the election of a presidential election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And while a lot of that got very much, it was basically the battle, you could say, for our country. Many people felt like, but a lot of the, you could say, politics that affect more of the people in certain areas, say our area for specific example, kind of go underlooked. So I wanted to get your perspective of just how important local politics are.
Yes, I think local politics is extremely important and extremely underrated. Your city council members, your mayors, your DAs, your justice of the peace, these people can change your life in an instant. We have city council meetings every second and fourth Monday of the month where we make decisions that could literally change the whole aspect of your life, whether it is talking about infrastructure changes, whether it is talking about voting places, whether it's talking about new technology or community engagement. And I think a lot of people forget that a lot of these national movements start locally, right? You build local power. And what happens is, as we build local power in one city, another city sees what, the city of Prairie View is doing, says, I like what y'all doing, let's connect. So now you have two cities fighting for the same thing. Then another city sees that. So now 3 cities, now 4 cities. So now the state and the county sees all of these cities starting to combine in this local power. So now what they do, they create county and state power, which influences the federal and national power. So most movements don't go from top down. It's from the bottom up. So if you are engaged with your community, if you get engaged in local politics, you get engaged, with your neighbors, and you get engaged in what's happening, you can literally start movements. As in the city of Prairie View, when the students had a voting case that went all the way to the Supreme Court, which changed the whole game when it comes to voting on college campuses. That was all in the city of Prairie View. It was a local movement that became a national movement. So I think local politics is very important, and we need to do a better job of teaching the younger and older generation to be involved with the community.
So, a very favorite topic amongst Prairie View students is the fact that Prairie View is known to be a food desert of sorts. You've got the Checkers that's just up the road on the main road to Prairie View. You've got the Chick-fil-A that's on campus. But besides that, not a lot of options. Is there anything that you can do as a city councilman to sort of fix that?
Yeah, so I want to say there's two efforts. There is a governmental effort in there, but then there's also community effort. On the governmental side, we're still a young city. We were incorporated in 1969, only 50 years old, which is a lot younger than our counterparts to the cities adjacent to us, like Hempstead or Waller, that's over a century old. So we're still putting in our infrastructure, our water capacity, our sewage lines, our drainage lines, and making sure that we have the things in place to support major businesses coming in. And over time, we are seeing more land getting sold off. We're seeing small but incremental development, but as development starts coming down to 90, and it starts going from Waller, next thing you're going to hit is Prairie View. So I expect in the next 5 to 10 years that a lot of these food businesses that will have the capacity to feed the citizens of the city of Prairie View will see the city of Prairie View as the destination spot, but that does not erase the fact that we can still do for ourselves as a community, right? We can create community gardens to make fresh food. We can create farmers market so that our people can get healthier options. So I think there's a two-sided aspect. So I'm always a big time advocate, not solely relying on the government to fix problems that can be fixed by the community, because they really should be in addition to, because government is about the reallocation of resources for the community to also do for themselves. So I think if both entities work together, then we could see a lot more changes happening a lot more quicker in the city of Prairie View.
I'm just gonna switch it to the national side of things. In June, we saw Juneteenth being passed as a federal holiday. But on the other side, while that gesture was seen as mostly symbolic, many people would argue that there's still a lot of work to be done. What are your thoughts on that?
So I completely agree. I see the Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday the same way I see the Black Lives Matter murals on the streets the same way that I see companies having these promotions for Black History Month. It is symbolic, but it should be in addition to systemic change. So I don't believe that symbolic victories should come before systemic change. It should be systemic change then symbolic victories. So we still have these incredible wealth gaps between Black and brown people and whites in America. We still see these mass incarceration effect where you see prisons are 1/3 African American, even though we're at 13% of the population. We still see the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill hasn't been passed. We still see our voting rights being attacked from federal and even state levels. So I like symbolic victories, but I don't want it to be a decoration or a perfume on the casket to replace the systemic change that we've been asking for centuries now, from our ancestors down from generation to where we are now.
Systemic change, um, and that falls in with the next question. Would you agree, say that Congress was to decide to all vote in favor, which is 100% unanimous. That's party lines, that whole sort of thing. But if United States Congress was to pass reparations, would you agree with something along the lines of that?
Oh yes, I mean we are Black people, descendants of the enslaved, deserve reparations because you can see that from when we got out of slavery, a lot of people celebrate the end of slavery, even though slavery never ended, because the 13th Amendment says that slavery is still acceptable under punishment and crime. But even after they released the black or the enslaved from chattel slavery, they still promised us 40 acres and a mule with General Order Number 15 by William T. Sherman, which never happened, right? They said that we were going to be able to get land, that we were going to get some wealth, but they instead said, pick yourself up from your bootstraps, but without any resources. And so all these movements that we've been having have been not more so for just inclusion of culture, but more so for inclusion of power, inclusion of resources. So right now, you got African Americans in prison for marijuana usage while it's legal in, I want to say, 19 states. So it's a $1 billion industry, but we still got, African Americans in prison for a law that now people are freely doing. So I would definitely would like to see like some of those funds, some of those revenue that we get from the marijuana industry go back into the Black community, right? Restore our community, allow us to get wealth, allow us to get land, allow us to get businesses, and really start to equal out the playing field in a way that was never done for our ancestors.
Yeah. So also speaking to that is, the fact that a little bit of more feasible options. You said building up our own communities. That kind of touches on the next thing that I want to talk to you about Black businesses and Black companies that are starting up. And I just wanted to ask you, how important is that to support our own and to really buy Black?
I think it's very important to circulate the dollar. Like I said, I don't believe in 100% reliance on the government. I actually believe in more reliance on your community and your neighbors next to you to help build you up more than anything. And the way that it works is right now the black dollar falls out of the community quicker than any dollar out of any ethnicity. And I think we got to be a little bit more conscious of one, whenever we do spend, we do spend with those that will take care of us in the sense that we will be treated more fairly. But then also, when it comes to entrepreneurship, a lot of times we have the stigma and stereotypes with black businesses, but we don't have the same when it comes to other businesses. But that doesn't mean that black businesses should still treat people any type of way. There still needs to be respect on both sides. But once we start having the ideology that our dollar in our community is worth something, that our dollar is not just currency, but it's also power, and we decide to utilize that power to empower others within our community, I think that we'll get we'll truly make some changes in the systems in this country.
Yeah, definitely. So I remember I had I was with I had a Thanksgiving last year with my uncles, and that was whenever the George Floyd protests. That was a topic that we talked about, and one of the things that I remember asking him, or just just asking anyone, was that where would you see all these protests? Where would you see where could you see the impact of it, say 10, 15 years from now? And my uncle, he, in turn, he replied and he said, we really just have to wait, because all these things that are just happening right now, you can't make that quick assumption that it's just going to matter, like it's going to change the system within, a few days. So my question to you is, do you think, how long do you think it is until like how much more would we have to go through, in essence, for real systemic change to take place?
So change is happening every day.
Hmm.
A lot of times the revolution is not televised. Remember, there are systems that our ancestors, that our great grandparents went through, that we don't have to deal with now.
Hmm.
There are systems that our grandparents had to deal with that we don't have to deal with now. There are systems that our parents had to deal with that we don't have to deal with now. But there's still a lot of systems still in place. So I think that the fight for everlasting change is still always going to happen until those gaps in the treatment and the psychological treatment, whether it's in the education system, having fairness and teaching Black history as saying
Hmm.
that we teach European history, the way that through the medical system, that there aren't the disparages about the treatment of Black women in the medical system in comparison to other ethnicities. I think that there will always be a fight, but I think that change is happening every day. And a lot of times we don't hear about movements or really read about the impacts of movement until years after, but things are happening now. Just as, during the civil rights movement, you don't really understand the impact until there's analysis after the fact. So I think it's happening every day. So we just gotta, keep fighting for something and stand for something. And I think our children will see the impact that we may not see now.
Yeah, definitely. Journey of a mile or 1,000 steps, or however the phrase goes. It begins with that one step, and I definitely concur with you there. So the last question that I want to leave you with before we go is, how did you come to Prairie View?
Man, so Prairie View is my home, and Prairie View. A lot of people may say that Prairie View don't have much, but when it comes to me, Prairie View gave me everything. I came to Prairie View because I was originally going to go to the University of Oklahoma off of
Mhm.
engineering. But I remember that when I was young, my parents asked me where I want to go. And I named off a couple of schools in Texas. And they said, "What about Prairie View?" And I was like, "What? Nah, bro, I'm not going to Prairie View." This was in middle school. And my parents they went to Grambling, so they're HBCU grads, and they got on my head for it. And it made me realize at that time that all the stigmas and stereotypes I know about Prairie View is by people who ain't never went to Prairie View, never went to class from Prairie View, never spent $1 at Prairie View, and for sure ain't graduate from Prairie View. So I remember when I was in high school, about to take a trip to University of Oklahoma, was passing by Prairie View. I was like, let me just go ahead and check. And I remember, well, I used to hear in high school that Prairie View is dingy, is dirty. I remember when I stepped on campus, I was like, man, this is beautiful. So if people were lying about that, then what else are they lying about? So I started doing research on the academic program. They were top notch in engineering. Then I started doing some research about professors and everything. And my research led me to the fact that everything they told me about Prairie View is a lie. So I need to look for myself. And when I was at the University of Oklahoma, the whole time I was thinking PV is the place to be. So by the time I left Oklahoma, I knew I was going to be a Prairie View Panther. Been there ever since, 2-time graduate, vice president, sophomore, homecoming king, first runner-up, Mr. Prairie View A&M University, pals, and a myriad of other accomplishments. And I just can never thank Prairie View enough for creating the man that you see today.
Yeah, well, that is the end of this interview. Definitely thank you, Xante, for coming on and being a part of this. And thank you, the viewers, for watching this at home. This has been The Hill. I'm your host, Worthington Moore, and this was an interview with Xante Wallace. I will see you later on this week.
Stay groovy, y'all.